January 30th, 1944, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire. Block F hummed with experimental machinery rarely seen beyond post office laboratories. Colossus, Britain's first programmable electronic computer, processed intercepted German signals at 1,500 characters per second. Standard teleprinter analysis required weeks. This machine completed runs in hours, yet success depended on one variable beyond engineering control: enemy operator discipline. German High Command used Lorenz cipher machines for strategic communications, considered unbreakable by Berlin's cryptographic staff. British analysts called these signals tunny. Breaking them required identifying patterns in streams of binary pulses, millions of calculations beyond human capability. Then, on this cold morning, Intercept Station Knockholt delivered two messages of similar length from the same German transmission link. Wireless operators noted unusual header characteristics. Traffic analysts suspected reused key settings, a catastrophic lapse called depth. If confirmed, the structural logic of Germany's most secure cipher system would become visible. In Block F's maintenance log, engineer Arthur Linden recorded valve temperatures and tape feed adjustments. He didn't yet know the intercepts waiting in the dispatch pouch would expose secrets Hitler's generals believed eternally hidden. The frost hadn't lifted when Arthur Linden cycled through Bletchley's back gate, navigating puddles, reflecting blackout lamps. Inside Block F, solder and machine oil scented the air. He ran fingers along Colossus's frame, 3,700 valves glowing like metallic fireflies, each one a potential failure point. "Morning, Arthur," Alan Coombs said, rubbing exhaustion from his eyes. "One valve dropout overnight. Which bay?" "3. Replaced. Runs smooth now." Arthur checked the maintenance book. 0406 hours. Valve. V190 failure. Their war wasn't tanks or bombers. It was heat, timing, fragile components indifferent to victory. Morning procedures began. Power checks, tape alignment, pulse consistency tests. At 09:15, intercepted traffic arrived from Knockholt, fresh from German High Command. Arthur threaded tape carefully, fingers blackened with ink dust. Colossus responded with a purr rising into metallic growl. As the machine surged alive, Arthur felt what he always felt. This wasn't simply machinery, it was a vow that hidden patterns could be extracted from enemy arrogance. But today, something felt sharper. The intercept paper crackled differently under his fingertips. By morning's end, operators whispered near the printers. Something in the traffic looked wrong. Not error wrong, slip wrong, the kind only pressure-exhausted humans made. Human slips were cryptography's rarest gift. Arthur closed the maintenance book, sensing the shift beginning. Rain returned by noon, tapping sealed windows like impatient fingers. Bletchley's courtyards filled with puddles. People rushed between blocks clutching cipher folders. Arthur wasn't briefed on intelligence, but months in Block F taught him fragments. Whispers of tunny, the Lorenz codename, reports of increasing German traffic volume, enemy command sounding frantic. He knew basics. Lorenz wasn't Enigma, not portable or front line. This was Hitler, OKH, highest echelons, strategy-level messages via high-frequency teleprinter, using machines the British called SZ, or tunny. Breaking Lorenz required machinery capable of thousands of operations per second. That's why Tommy Flowers built Colossus. Why Arthur, who once repaired post office switches, now fought wars against electrons and probabilities. During midday pause, Arthur stood outside Block F's narrow eave, watching dispatch riders speed across gravel. Deliberate footsteps approached. Major Ralph Tester, head of the testery, Lorenz's code-breaking section, tall, broad-shouldered, imposing against hunched mathematicians. "Linden," Tester said without preamble. Arthur straightened. "Yes, sir?" "Was your machine running this morning?" "Yes, sir," smoothly. Tester scanned rain-soaked fields beyond the fence. "Suspicious pattern in today's intercepts. 2 messages from the same German link. Similar lengths. Operator chatter identifiable in headers." Arthur kept his voice calm. "You think someone on the German side made a mistake, or was interrupted, or became careless?" He let that hang. "You'll get new tape shortly. Check every pulse, every coincidence count, every ratio. If there's a depth," he shook his head, "the entire war shifts by inches before nightfall." Arthur watched Tester disappear into rain. Depth. A catastrophic operator error. 2 messages with identical key settings. A once-in-a-war lapse. A gift from desperation or fatigue. Inside, the machine hummed through walls, waiting. Arthur returned to Block F, chill running down his spine. Something was coming. Colossus would feel it first. New tape arrived at 15:52. Damp from the ride, smelling of wet canvas. Arthur wiped edges dry, fed it into the machine. The tape jerked. Tension, irregularity. He corrected it manually, breathing slowly. Then the machine roared alive. Light cascaded across photomultiplier panels. Valve banks glowed fiercely. Punches flicked like teeth chewing faster than nature intended. Arthur watched output roll out line by line, clattering into the print tray. He could tell before reading numbers that something extraordinary had happened. Even the sound was wrong. The pattern was too clean, too repetitive, too mirrored. This wasn't encryption behaving as designed. This was encryption stumbling. He leaned close, eyes tracing bit value columns, start bits, stop bits, repeating elements aligning every few characters. Not perfectly, but enough. A depth. A true depth. German operators had sent 2 different messages with the same keying sequence. He froze, fingers still resting on the tape feed switch. A depth was the cryptologic equivalent of a crack in a dam. If widened, entire secrets, high command orders, divisions shifted, supply chains rerouted, could surge through. "Arthur," Coombs appeared at his shoulder. Arthur didn't look away from numbers. "They reused a key." Coombs inhaled sharply. "You're certain? Look at the periodicity." Arthur's finger tapped the sheet. "This isn't noise, this is structure." Coombs shouted down the room, "Get the testery, now!" Operators scrambled. Arthur kept staring at output. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't overreading. It was real. Pulse intervals were clear as drumbeats. This was the mistake cryptanalysts prayed for, but never dared expect. His heartbeat accelerated, because he knew exactly what this meant. Tonight, they would start tearing apart a machine the Germans believed unbreakable. And if Arthur was right, nothing in Hitler's command network would ever be truly hidden again. Word spread faster than rain clouds. By 1620, Bletchley Park seemed charged with invisible current. Men and women moved urgently, boots clapping against floorboards, papers clutched to chests. Arthur remained at Colossus, monitoring temperature. The machine's valves ran dangerously hot, hotter than any specification Flowers could convince London to formally approve. But they needed that heat. They needed the speed. Lorenz was far more complex than Enigma. At 1634, Bill Tutte himself entered Block F. Arthur had seen him only twice. A quiet, almost ghost-like mathematician whose mind seemed to run on different voltage. Tutte's eyes scanned the output sheet without a word, absorbing patterns like old acquaintances. "Depth confirmed?" he asked softly. Arthur swallowed. "Yes, sir." Tutte nodded, barely perceptible. 2 messages, Same chai wheel settings. Likely operator fatigue or miskeying after a storm. The Germans push their men as hard as we push ours. Coombs stepped closer. What do you need? Clean transcription of both messages, Tutte said, and every parity irregularity highlighted. I'll need the differencing chart. Arthur's pulse quickened. This was how breakthroughs began. Not in silence, but in the mechanical roar of a machine pushed to its limits. Tutte turned to Arthur. Can your machine hold steady? We'll need long runs. Arthur met his gaze. Yes, sir. She'll hold. He hoped she would. The machine had temperament, a living presence. Push her too hard and valves would blow like light bulbs. Push too little and patterns wouldn't emerge. As Tutte left, Coombs leaned in. Arthur, you realize what this means? I do. If Tutte cracks the structure of the Lorenz machine from this depth, Coombs exhaled slowly. The Germans won't know we've been reading their highest level traffic. Ever. Arthur nodded, but inside, he felt something closer to dread than triumph. Because he understood what came next. Colossus would have to evolve. Faster, smarter, more reliable. And he would be responsible for its heart. The fragile glow of its thousands of valves. Night settled over Bletchley like a heavy coat. Lamps flickered behind blackout curtains, casting thin golden lines on wet pavement. Arthur hadn't gone home. He didn't even feel tired. Adrenaline did something unnatural to the body, sharpening senses while dulling fatigue. Coombs and two operators ran test tapes on Colossus to prepare for full analysis of the Lorenz depth. Arthur crouched beside the main panel, listening to temperature rise through metal plates. Inside each valve, a tiny thread glowed orange, a miniature battlefield where electrons waged war at blistering speed. If even one faltered, the entire computation would crumble. A loud pop echoed. Valve failure. Arthur was already moving. Which bay? Bay 5? An operator shouted. Arthur reached it in seconds, hands working instinctively. Power down, release latch, slide the tray, find the dead valve, V3407, replace, reseat, close, lock, power up. Colossus hummed back to life, her rhythm steady once more. Coombs gave him a short nod. Good hands. Arthur ignored the compliment. She's running too hot. If we push her through the night, we don't have a choice. Arthur felt the truth sink in, because the Germans didn't sleep. The war didn't sleep. And now, with this depth, the Allies had a door into the mind of the enemy. If they failed to open it quickly, the opportunity might close forever. He checked the gauges again. Temperatures rising, but stable, barely. Operators threaded fresh tape. Arthur stepped back as the machine began its rapid-fire chatter, each punch mark reflecting like silver flecks under the lamps. The output was a storm of numbers, but to Tutte they were keys, mechanisms, gateways into the structure of a machine no Allied soldier had ever seen. Arthur suddenly felt the enormity of it, the unseen battle they were fighting. No rifle, no aircraft, just wires, valves, and patterns. And yet this room, hidden in the British countryside, might decide the fate of divisions and nations. He touched the metal frame, feeling its pulse. Colossus wasn't just machinery now. She was the first electronic weapon built to match the speed of war itself. It was midnight when the breakthrough happened. A small moment, fragile and enormous at once. Arthur had stepped out for a moment, leaning against cold brick wall behind Block F. Rain had stopped, fog pooled near hedgerows. When he returned, the room was silent except for Colossus's low hum idling between runs. Tutte stood over the printout, pencil tapping gently. Arthur approached slowly, sensing the shift. "What is it?" he asked. Tutte didn't look up. The operator, the German one, he made a classic mistake. He tapped the sheet again. He abbreviated. Arthur frowned. Abbreviated what? A repeated phrase, sent the same sentence twice at the start of each message, but shortened it the second time. He was in a hurry, or tired, or both. Arthur's breath caught, because 2 messages with the same key were already a gift. But 2 messages where part of the plaintext overlapped? That was divine intervention. Look here, Tutte said softly, almost reverently. The structure of the chai wheels. It emerges. Visible. Predictable. Arthur stared. Realization dawning like sunrise. This wasn't just a depth, it was a blueprint. The Germans had inadvertently revealed the wiring pattern of their own top-secret cipher machine. Tutte spoke again, voice steady but weighted. We can deduce the wheel patterns, their lengths, their stepping behavior, their logical structure. Coombs exhaled sharply. Good Lord. Arthur felt the air grow thick around him. Major Tester needs this immediately, Tutte said. Everything changes now. Everything. Arthur looked at the machine. It sat still, quiet, like a predator momentarily resting after a successful hunt. He knew what came next. They would need Colossus faster, smaller margins for error, larger valve counts, more parallel processing, more speed, and that burden, the physical, mechanical realization of Tutte's deduction, would rest on the shoulders of Flowers, Coombs, and men like Arthur who lived in the guts of the machine. He wiped his palms on his trousers, realizing they were shaking, because tonight the Germans had spoken without knowing, and tomorrow Bletchley Park would begin listening to everything. At 0210, Block F glowed like a forge. Operators had been replaced by a fresh shift. Mathematicians drifted in and out like restless ghosts. Clerks carried stacks of printouts through corridors with rigid urgency. Tester returned with a team from the testery, ordering immediate long-run tests. Colossus had to process thousands of combinations to verify Tutte's deductions. Arthur stood at the main console, sweat gathering at his hairline despite the cold. The machine's heat was relentless, a furnace disguised as logic. Coombs checked the valve boards again. How's Bay 3? Stable, Arthur said, but if we push for continuous runs, Russia, she might fatigue. Coombs smiled faintly. So might we? The new tape, the full Lorenz depth, was threaded. The countdown began. Ready, an operator said. Arthur held his breath. Run. The machine erupted. Light strobed across the room. Fans whirred at near-failure pitch. The high-speed tape whipped so fast it blurred into a single grey line. Arthur watched every gauge, every flutter of the feed arm, every slight tremble in the frame. The printout surged. Numbers poured like rainfall, patterns crystallizing. Coincidences tallied at blistering speed. Tutte hovered behind them, eyes sharp despite the late hour. Good, he murmured. Very good. Then Arthur saw it, a spike in the coincidence counter. He verified, adjusted, ran the segment again. Another spike, and another. Tutte leaned over his shoulder. That's it. That's the wheel alignment. Arthur felt his chest tighten. This was no longer effort. This was breakthrough. Operators paused, mesmerized by the unfolding revelation. Tutte scribbled notes furiously, each line another crack in the German cipher fortress. Arthur wiped his brow. His hands trembled slightly. Coombs clapped him gently on the shoulder. You've kept her alive through all of this. That's no small thing. Arthur didn't smile. He looked at the machine, its glowing valves, its roaring fans, its relentless hunger for power and speed. He knew the truth before anyone said it. This was only the beginning. Colossus would have to evolve, and the war would demand more than any one machine could bear. Still, he braced himself. For when the sun rose, The real battle would begin. By dawn, Arthur's eyes burned from fatigue, but he couldn't look away from the machine he had tended like a living creature. Every valve glowed with purpose, every rotating drum hummed with the silent weight of consequence. Major Tester returned with a new directive. Prepare for extended runs. Days, not hours. Tutte's breakthrough required full exploitation. Arthur nodded even before the order finished. The responsibility seemed to root deeper into his shoulders. You'll need to monitor every bay, Tester said. Failures at this stage would be disastrous. Germany must never suspect we can read their highest command traffic. Arthur swallowed. Yes, sir. As Tester left, Coombs placed schematics on the workbench. Flowers wants changes implemented as soon as possible. Faster clocking, improved synchronizing circuits, more reliable photomultipliers. Arthur studied the sheet. The modifications were ambitious, bordering reckless. Increase tape speed, reduce tolerance window, ramp up stepping rates. Can the machine even handle this? Arthur asked. Coombs rubbed his temples. It must. Arthur moved back to the machine, fingertips grazing its steel frame. Heat radiated like the breath of a beast. He whispered almost unconsciously, You'll have to hold, old girl. When he glanced at the newest tape feed, he noticed a faint irregularity, a slight tear at one edge. A flaw like that could be catastrophic under higher speeds. He trimmed the defective portion, rethreaded the tape, and secured the tension arm. Details mattered now. A torn strip, a misaligned sprocket, a faulty valve, any could corrupt the analysis. Worse, it could alert the Germans. A sudden burst of static from wireless operators in the next block punctured the silence. A new intercept was arriving, high-level Lorenz traffic straight from German Army Command. Arthur felt the weight settle in his chest once more. They were about to see what Hitler's generals were planning. With near real-time clarity, every pulse, every stepping wheel, every fragment of encrypted intent. The enemy had spoken freely for years, believing their cipher unbreakable. Now, because of a single operator's abbreviation, they were exposed. Arthur tightened one more screw, listening to the distant thump of boots on wet pavement. The machine was ready. He only hoped he was too. At 10:04 a.m., Block F became a crucible. The upgraded circuits had been installed. Every connection hummed, raw and volatile. The new tape spool, perfectly cut, perfectly aligned, glistened under the photomultiplier array. Operators waited with nervous hands hovering above their stations. Coombs stood beside Arthur. We're pushing Colossus faster than she's ever run. Arthur nodded. She can take it. He hoped he wasn't lying. Tutte entered the room last, carrying a clipboard brimming with hastily scribbled wheel alignment predictions. These settings, he said, should reveal the chi-wheel configurations with full clarity. If correct, we'll have the framework of the German machine. Arthur's breath tightened. Not the deciphered message, the machine itself, deduced from patterns. Start the run, Tutte commanded. The operator hit the switch. Colossus roared, not hummed, not whirred, roared. The high-speed tape blurred into a nearly transparent ribbon. Light strobed violently across the photomultipliers. The valve bays glowed so hot, Arthur feared they'd melt. The noise was overwhelming, mechanical thunder, punctuated by the rapid-fire clicking of tally counters. The floor seemed to vibrate. Dust shook loose from the rafters. Arthur leaned over the panel, eyeing the gauges. Tape speed, elevated but stable. Valve temperatures, dangerous but below failure threshold. Feed arm tension, perfect. Counting circuits, synchronized within tolerance. The output printer fired line after line, faster than operators could tear them off. Across the room, Tutte hovered over the first sheet, pencil racing. Yes, if this holds. Another spike in the coincidence counter, then another, and then a third. Arthur felt every muscle in his body coil tight. The patterns were no longer fragments. They were forming a skeleton, a shape, a machine. Tutte circled several values. That's the stepping pattern of Chi 1, and Chi 2 is right behind it. Coombs let out a short, disbelieving laugh. We're seeing straight into the heart of their device. Arthur swallowed hard. For months they'd only guessed how the Lorenz machine functioned. Now, because Colossus was running at speeds no mechanical device could match, the Germans' logic, the logic they trusted to conceal their war, was stripping bare. Keep running, Tutte said, voice taut. We're minutes away from the full cycle. Arthur nodded, adjusting the coolant airflow, praying the valves sustained their glow. He felt sweat slide down his spine, despite the cold. Every second of this run meant the difference between breakthrough and blackout. If even one valve blew, the output could corrupt. Tutte's deductions could falter. The Germans could remain hidden for another year. But if the machine held, the war might shift today. Another spike. The printer screamed. The counters hammered. Colossus reached its highest ever operating frequency. Arthur braced himself. The air seemed to vibrate with possibility. Then Tutte's pencil froze mid-air. He stared at a single printed line, a cascade of coincidences, perfectly aligned. Stop the run, he said quietly. The operator slammed the brake. Colossus slowed, fans whining as if gasping for breath. Tutte turned to face the room. We have it, he said. The structure of the Lorenz chi wheels. All 12. Arthur felt something inside him collapse and expand simultaneously. The Germans had just lost their invisibility, and they didn't even know it. For several seconds, no one spoke. The room was full of the after noise, the echo of machinery cooling, the sharp scent of hot metal, the faint ticking of relays returning to neutral. Arthur stood frozen beside the main console, heart still pounding in the same rhythm as Colossus's peak speed roar. Tutte laid the printout on the central table. These values confirm everything: the stepping, the wheel pin counts, the logical relationships. An operator whispered, "We broke it." "No," Tutte corrected softly. "We understood it, and now we can break every message it produces." Major Tester burst into the room moments later. "Report." Tutte handed him the sheet with the wheel patterns. "The machine the Germans use, the Lorenz device. Its internal structure is now known to us." Tester scanned the numbers, eyes narrowing. "You're certain?" Tutte didn't blink. "Absolutely." Tester exhaled slowly, then turned to Arthur. "Linden, prepare Colossus for continuous decrypt cycles. We'll run all available intercepts through it." Arthur nodded, throat tight. He felt the weight of the order on his bones. Continuous operation meant pushing the machine harder than ever. As Tester and Tutte left, Coombs approached Arthur. "You look pale." "It's a lot," Coombs chuckled. "You think? The highest level German cipher is about to start spilling its guts because of a sleepy operator." Arthur managed a thin smile. "And because of this beast." He tapped the metal frame. Coombs lowered his voice. "This changes everything. Every convoy, every division movement, every deception plan." Arthur nodded, but he also understood the darker truth. If Germany ever suspected their Lorenz system was compromised, they would replace it immediately. New wheels, new logic, a new code, and the Allies would be blind again. He checked the valve temperatures. Most had cooled. A few glowed stubbornly. He recorded fresh logs. 10:52 hours. Peak run achieved. Machine stable, preparing for continuous cycle operations. He didn't write the next part, that for the first time in the entire war, he felt as though Germany had just spoken to him directly, not in code, but in fear, because the moment their command realized what had happened today, everything on the continent would change, and their spies, their generals, their entire intelligence network, would know the war was lost long before the bombs or battles proved it. Word reached Churchill's liaison by midday. A messenger arrived in a mud-splattered motorcycle coat, demanding immediate entry to the testery. Arthur watched him disappear into Block D, knowing that by nightfall someone in London would be briefed with phrases like unprecedented access, top strategic insight, threat level reversal. Meanwhile, in Block F, Arthur and the operators prepared Colossus for its first continuous decrypt cycle. At 13:15, the new tape arrived. Raw Lorenz traffic from German field headquarters. High command messages sent under the assumption of absolute secrecy. Arthur threaded the tape. His fingers were steady now. Not calm, but determined. "Start her slow," Coombs said. Arthur nodded. The machine eased into motion, tape gliding, valves warming. "Bring her up." Arthur adjusted the speed. The machine surged, printer output flooded the tray, counters hammered, light flickered across the photomultiplier array like lightning in a steel cavern. When the night shift arrived, Arthur remained in Block F, refusing rest. The adrenaline still clung to him, mixing with exhaustion until the distinction blurred. Coombs finally forced him outside. 5 minutes of air, he ordered, then back in, but you need to breathe. Arthur stepped into the cold. Moonlight broke through the fog, illuminating the quiet grounds of Bletchley. He could hear distant footsteps, the soft clatter of a teletype from another block, the muted rumble of a generator. He felt strangely untethered, victorious, overwhelmed, and deeply aware of the responsibility now on their shoulders. Germany didn't know they'd made a fatal mistake. One operator abbreviating a phrase, a tired man in a bunker somewhere, had opened a crack that Colossus widened into a chasm. Arthur wondered about that operator. Was he reprimanded? Did he even realize? Did he suspect the mistake that would echo across continents? Back inside, Tutte and Tester discussed immediate dissemination to Allied command. Decrypted insights would guide logistics, strategy, deception efforts. Arthur listened quietly, leaning against the warm metal of Colossus. His machine, their machine, had become something beyond engineering, a weapon without bullets, a missile without fuel, a silent force capable of steering armies. He ran a hand across the metal frame. The machine hummed gently now, cooling after its long sprint. "Good work today," Coombs said softly. Arthur nodded. "Feels like I've aged a year," Coombs smirked. "Wait until Flowers sees what we ran her through." Arthur inhaled deeply. "Do you think the Germans will ever know?" Coombs hesitated. "Not for years, maybe decades, maybe never." Arthur looked down at the dim glow of valves. If the Germans understood what happened today, their entire intelligence apparatus would collapse overnight. Their spies would realize they'd been blind for months. Their command would scramble for alternatives that didn't yet exist. But they didn't. No. And that ignorance was the Allies' greatest weapon. Arthur felt a quiet melancholy settle behind his eyes. Victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a burden carried by those who could never speak of it. He brushed his thumb against the machine's steel edge and whispered, "You've done well." Colossus hummed in reply. Arthur wouldn't witness the moment the Germans realized the truth. No one at Bletchley Park would, but history would. It happened slowly, First, when division movements were anticipated with uncanny precision, then when supply convoys were intercepted before maps were printed, then when deception operations, like those preparing for D-Day, unfolded with such eerie Allied accuracy that German commanders privately accused their own intelligence staff of negligence. German spies began noticing inconsistencies, reports contradicted reality, Allied forces outmaneuvered plans that had never been transmitted openly. Some whispered, "Our cipher is compromised." Others dismissed the notion. Impossible. Lorenz is unbreakable. But by early 1944, unmistakable signs rippled through the Abwehr. Contingencies failed, Allied predictions became uncanny, and the German High Command began to panic quietly beneath confident facades. The realization didn't come in a dramatic moment. It came as a slow, dawning horror. Someone was reading their most secret words. Someone knew them better than they knew themselves. And someone had turned silence into victory. Back at Bletchley, Arthur only knew what filtered through whispers, but he felt it, the subtle shift in atmosphere, the tightening of Allied plans, the sudden confidence in commanders' voices. Years after the war, when Arthur was an old man, he would finally read a declassified summary. The Lorenz cipher, believed secure by German intelligence, was compromised through operator error and subsequent British electronic analysis. The resulting decrypts, known as Ultra, contributed significantly to the collapse of enemy strategic planning. He remembered that morning, the rain, the strange pulse pattern, the tension in his chest. He remembered Colossus roaring like a living creature as she tore open the enemy's hidden heart. And he remembered the moment Tutte whispered, "We have it." Decades later, he would still feel the echo of that moment, when a single mistake, a single depth, a single machine built from fragile glowing valves changed the course of a world war. Arthur looked at the rusted remains of an old Colossus panel on display in a museum case one winter morning, long after the war. Visitors passed without understanding, but he understood. He leaned closer and whispered, just once to the cold metal, "You helped end it."